Welcome to the final episode of our Metalepsis series, everyone. This series, we had the pleasure of talking with Dillin Apelyan, the brand new host of the One Shot podcast and designer of this very game. In today's episode, we get into some really great discussion, but before we get to all of that, here's what to expect in the calls to action. Join me after the show for my thoughts on this series and the normal show closer stuff, including thanking our patrons. It's just me right now since Amelia had ECT this last weekend and I had some health issues and things have been kind of all over the place for us, which had delayed the release of the episode a tad. So thank you for your patience, everybody. With all of that out of the way, enjoy the show, everybody.
Welcome back to our discussion episode. Last time we finished our session 0 for Metalepsis. This episode, we are going to be discussing the character creation process. We are excited to welcome back Dillin Apelyan. Do you want to reintroduce yourself to everyone again? And wow, that's Ryan.
I would love
reintroduce
to.
yourselves again. Yourself for everyone.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dillin Apelyan, and I use the pronouns she, he, and they. I am Super Dillin on all social media, and I am a game designer and actual play performer who is the host and GM of One Shot and I on the Atomless.
A podcast, the One Shot podcast, a podcast where they know how to read their intros that they've been reading for 6 years.
Well, to be fair, I've only been doing it for a few months, but
there you go.
Yeah.
God, that was so
Normally
terrible.
we would have you introduce a character that you made in the last episode.
Tell us about Rax.
About Rax.
Yeah.
Oh,
tell us everything about
Rax.
Rax. Now's your chance.
Rax is a bipedal sea otter.
Yes.
Armsman who makes bombs and booby traps, and I think wears a vest that's so long it drags on the ground, with lots of little pockets full of gadgets and doodads.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And Rax is always making, puns about explosives. No matter whether it's appropriate or not.
Amelia loves him. Marcella probably doesn't, but
Right.
Marcella does not love him, but I think that Rax and the rest of the crew are all pretty close in real life. Yeah.
Oh, I love him.
That's amazing.
Ryan, please tell us about your character, who is also my character.
Yeah, this is the weird characterception that this game is great about. So I am playing Amelia's character, Gideon the Star Crusher. Mm-hmm. So Gideon's primary goal is just to settle down, open a nice little low pressure tea shop, and bring some relaxation into the world. But right now they've got a dramatic connection to the necromantic energies of the universe, which allows them to basically absorb the life force of dying stars, to A, protect people, but B, also become extraordinarily powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So
amazing.
Good old Gideon the Star Crusher.
Good old Gideon.
What is going to be Gideon's signature drink at her tea shop? I'm asking the hard-hitting, important questions.
Yes.
Because I feel like she's been dreaming of this tea shop. It's like, what is the thing that she's excited to serve? Like,
so there is a flower that only blooms during a certain like astronomical phenomena. Like, and then like taking that and creating a cosmic tea from it.
Ooh, is the tea sparkly? It needs to have glitter in it, please. Thank
100%
you.
sparkly. Yeah.
Great. That's important to me.
Yep. 100%. I was like picturing that before you said
All
it.
right.
So
You said cosmic tea, and I was like, it's got to have glitter.
It's got to have glitter.
What are you even doing?
I know. And Amelia, you want to tell us about your character, which is my character's player?
You have to.
Yes. My character is named Marcella. Marcella uses she, they pronouns. Marcella is playing in this really amazing campaign called Planetary Mausoleum. And you forgot about that, didn't you?
It's so good.
Marcella really wants to play a serious game. So Marcella is like determined to railroad this into a heartfelt, like gut-wrenching story, despite the other players in the group who clearly just want to have a fun time. Marcella regrets that in the past she's let the other players sort of take over the story and do what they want and let people change her story. And not this time. This time she is in charge. And Marcella is very much your stereotypical gamer. She just really loves pizza rolls and Mountain Dew. And she is here to steamroll everyone and have a good time, obviously. But that's secondary to being in charge.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. Let's go ahead and dive right into a segment that we are calling D20 for your thoughts.
D20 for your thoughts?
Ooh, nice.
Right. Vindication.
Yes. After 6 years.
I hate this pun. Ryan loves it. It's fine. So in this segment, we talk with our guests about their thoughts on the character creation process in this game, how it relates to all other games that you played, systems in general. Before we do that, Dillin, the most important question that I'm sure you've been preparing for months.
Yes.
How did you end up playing RPGs and then also being a designer and a podcaster? Tell us how you ended up here. How did it come to this?
Wow. Okay. So, well, I started playing RPGs like a million bajillion years ago, in a casual sense. I played a lot of Vampire the Masquerade, Demon the Fallen, Changeling the Lost. Those were my games. Growing up, and then I had no inclination of being, a creator of these things till I guess a couple of years ago. I was really an organizer in like the con space. I ran a gaming related convention. And I did I did organizing for like the gaming floor for a couple of cons. So that was like where I lived in this hobby space. And then I guess through doing that, through like the sharing and like connecting with people in the con space is sort of how I roundabout found like the online sphere of things and content creation and podcasting and things like that. And I fell utterly in love with it pretty quickly. And then after that, how did I figure out that I liked making games? I think, I made a really stupid one-pager as like a gag. And I think it just opened the floodgates. It just flipped a switch for me where it was just like, you have to do this constantly all the time. I can't even experience, it's sick actually. I can't experience a single earnest emotion without thinking about how I can gamify it. It's truly,
It's a problem I think a lot of us have.
It's
that,
truly
like, we're
wretched.
like, wouldn't it be funny if and then you do it and you're like, well, this is my life now, I guess.
I will be going through something traumatic. I will be crying and my brain is like, you should package this and sell it to people. You should have other people feel this way. I don't know.
Me over here trying to write a hack of Honey Heist where your stats are manic and depressive. I get it.
Yeah, there you go. See, you get it then. Yeah, exactly. So that's where we're at.
Yeah.
What this experience could use is more dice.
Yeah, you know what I was just thinking was, wouldn't it be funny if we gave this points and then we had to take turns?
Exactly.
Exactly. That's it.
Yep. Yeah, but what if we pretended it was happening to somebody else and that would make it better?
That would make it better.
No. What if it was happening to a fictional character?
Yikes.
It's fine.
Too real.
Dillin, in your opinion, what makes for a great character creation system, like mechanics wise? What's a good, juicy character creation mechanic that you'd absolutely love?
I don't like the word juicy.
I keep forgetting about that.
What's a absolutely dripping wet?
So just tell me your soggiest game, Dillin.
Tell me your soggiest,
your soggiest
sloppy character creation. I like it. I don't know a particular mechanic or a particular name for anything, but I don't want character creation to be a solo exercise ever.
Yes.
I want it to be collaborative in some way. At some point, that's what matters to me.
Yeah.
Do you think that like that collaborative at character creation is important when considering like a lot of games out there, they're going to have that collaborative aspect if they have the collaboration within character creation. Does that need to match up, or do we need to like could you have a collaborative character creation experience with a like more traditional sort of 100%. Game?
Have you? I don't know if you've played or have seen the Session Zero system by Mythic Grove, which is one of my favorite things ever. But that's really geared towards a more traditional role-playing game, a D&D, a Pathfinder, something along those lines. And a part of it built in is to build these little connecting ties to each character at the table and to come up with that together. And I think that is great for any role-playing game to have something like that where you are creating your backstories together and connecting them in some way. Because truthfully, if you create a little guy and he's all yours and that's it, the work you're setting up to try to make sure that other people at the table care about them as much as you do and want to be involved in their story going forward. It's not impossible. Certainly it happens. We'd make it work, but isn't it so much easier when everybody's had a hand in their creation?
It's so much more organic when you're doing it all together.
Yeah. And then caring about them is easy because you're invested. You were part of the process. And you know them because you were part of that process. So I just find that really easy to get everybody bought in on the same level of investment. So that's what I like.
We agree. We have never done a non-collab. I mean, obviously the show wouldn't work if we just like made characters ahead of time and then we're like, ta-da, this is our character sheet reading
This
podcast.
is our guy.
This is where we just read you the list of stats that we came up with off air.
And sadly, we did that a couple times early on.
Did we?
There were a couple sessions that we did that, and it felt awkward.
I think we did that in our
but we also blended it together,
practice
right?
sessions. Yeah, well, because we were talking about
We
games.
did that too,
We
yeah,
weren't
yeah.
as familiar with how we were doing things, obviously, and we didn't want to bog down the recording, being like, okay, if I put this over here and then like obviously we've gotten better with editing. We're just like, okay, we can do it here, and then we'll just take that out later.
Yeah. Hand wave it out.
But I mean, and it's dependent on the game too. But I think we've also leaned more into like, even if a game doesn't support that, we're like, nope, we're doing it. Like, I will listen to what you pick, and then I will pick based on what you did, even if the game doesn't support that.
Even in those early examples, we had a lot of collaboration as we were going through like what our choices kind of were, and things kind of morphed a bit. And then we ended up caring about each other's characters. Like, even if we made our characters concept ahead of time, having that input between the other players really helps flesh things out, and especially like you said, Dillin, with the relationships, right? Like, having those relationships collaboratively created is just a phenomenal experience to caring about the group as a whole instead of the individual characters even.
Absolutely. It just elevates it.
It does. I think it makes it a better experience for everyone. I know I say this all the time on this show, but like the concept of just meeting somebody at a tavern and then like going off and doing things that, like, why would you do that? Why would you just leave with some strangers you met when they're all carrying weapons? Don't do that. Do not meet people in a bar and leave with them.
Some of us like to live wildly. Okay,
that's called adventure.
It's called adventure.
Okay,
right.
You're an
it's
adventurer.
also called How to Get Murdered 101.
I mean, that's also called an adventure.
It's never happened to me so far.
So far, so good. What's the worst that could happen?
Exactly. I think
I'll tell you, Dillin. Let me tell you the worst.
Yeah.
I want to ask with this game, because you've talked about playing it in person and also like playing it online. This game doesn't have traditional character sheets. We had kind of questions that we answered, amongst each other, whatever. What do you feel like has been sort of the best way to keep track of the stories that you're telling? And, the difference between when you're doing that in person and just talking rather than doing it over text or things like that. I'm curious what that experience is like.
Yeah. So I actually, this is the first time I've done this for a game, but I did make stream assets for this game that come with it if you buy it on itch. So if you were to either play this in a Discord call or on a stream or something, I did make an overlay. And what I included is space for like a shared document, because I think that that's like the best way to just kind of have a shared working doc where you're just updating it together. And in person, I have done two ways. I've either had like us just kind of writing and passing back a notebook back and forth and writing in it. And I've also played where we have like index cards and are like filling in those things in like groupings. So like when something is related to like the thing that happened in Act 1, we put it all on the Act 1 card, like, so even if it like comes back later on and we invent it later in the game, but it has to do with that, then I'll write it on that card. So yeah, I like both of those. I think they're both fine. Really, honestly, just having anywhere to write things down together is very fun. And also I just like a shared document with two people's thoughts on it. It's very fun.
Yeah. I like being able to like have those things to go back to. I'm a big like note taker in my games too, especially.
Yeah.
And playing more and more online, I have a harder and harder time with like paying attention to what's going on the screen and writing things down. And, like there's been a number of games lately where I'm like, oh, I wish I had kept better track of things.
Absolutely. How do we think the character creation in Metalepsis stacks up to other systems, especially other like storytelling sort of level systems? Like, to me, the character creation in this game brought about a lot of like Starcross vibes in terms of
wow,
like,
what
the
a
simplicity
heavy
and
compliment.
succinct.
Yeah. Thank you. Great.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan, I love you dearly, Ryan. Ryan loves to be like, this is like Starcross, because Starcross is like Ryan's favorite game. That is no dig on you. But I was going to say that I do actually agree in this case, because you are trying to make things that go together, but also grade against each other. In that, so it has that same sort of dynamic of like finding that balance between like, these are things that work together and want to work together and should work together, but also talk to me about how they don't. And like helps you kind of set up that conflict ahead of time. Whereas in a lot of games, you are, especially when you do that collaborative creation, you know, you're building those connections between people, but you're not necessarily always building the conflicts between them. Sometimes you are. But I do like that this game, you know, and part of that is just by virtue of what the game is, but kind of sets up those things right away. That's like, you know, why aren't they working?
Well, I don't know. I don't know how I, you know what? I can't answer this question. I don't know how.
This is usually the question of, we're like, let us tell you how your game works.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know how to.
Let us talk to you about your game. This is the part where we're like, we really like your game. Let us tell you why. I really liked the fact that we technically only answered 4 questions.
We did.
I mean, we picked our themes,
right?
Which we just rolled on. But we only answered 4 questions. Yeah.
It was like the amount of detail in my brain of this universe, the characters that we created within this universe, and the quote unquote real life dichotomous like area that Marcella inhabits.
Right. So like we created your character and yet have like a full like idea of what this campaign is around it. Yeah. I created my character and we have an idea of like what the conflict is even between both Marcella and Gideon, but also like Marcella and these other players at the table. And like what Marcella's going through there too. And we answered 4 questions. Fun. And one of them is, what is your name and pronouns?
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. So it's like, it's a lot. Again, I will give this one to you, Ryan, similar to Starcross. It's like a lot with a very little, you know, we're getting a lot of information with, and that is solely down to the writing of the questions, right? Because you can't just ask any 4 questions and get a ton of detail. I mean, granted, we are the kind of people that tend to embellish, you know, like we got to that question of like, have you felt something going, you know, have you felt out of control or have I regretted things? And we could have just said yes or no. And obviously we were like, and here's why. But if you're not asking the right questions, you're not getting the answers that you want to go forward on. So like, they're well-written questions too.
Yeah, it's really interesting seeing the setup for this game and knowing that the like act structures, it has a little bit of setup going through those as well. So you're like kind of expanding on what you're doing here every act, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And like knowing that it feels like this game is an exploration of character creation throughout the whole game.
Yes.
Or so.
Yeah, this is a game about character creation.
That's very correct. Yes, it is. That's why I added, because technically those last 2 things that I asked you to do were not really part of the character creation like section of the game.
Yes.
But they are 2 things that I think are still like a very much part of that. And that goes on throughout the entire thing. You're building the characters through the story. It's sort of like, you know, how when you play a game like For the Queen, you know, you start with a blank slate and by the end you really know who all these characters are because you've done it through the story.
Yeah.
That's the goal here. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting because then it's kind of that whole you know, storytelling game versus role-playing game discussion, right? Like, yes, you're we're playing roles in this game, but we're also like putting our heads together to create this collaborative story together, much like For the Queen or whatever, right?
Right.
So, really, really interesting approach to that. And then the fact that this is like a complete meta narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just amazing.
Yes. Yeah, I created a character that's the person that's playing a character.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm very curious how different it would feel with a different medium. Right?
Yeah, if we had done like author and protagonist or
Right. That would have set a different vibe. It would have set the stage into a different way, and the story would be totally different. Like obviously, like Rax would not have come up, right. You know, which is just terrible, heartbreaking. Right. A world without Rax is just
isn't a world at all.
It isn't what I want to live in. No. Yeah. So you know, so with that, like Rax wouldn't have come up. This like dynamic that you created where you're frustrated with your other players, but love the characters, like that would not be a part of this. And that is gonna, like, were you to sit down and play through this game, like that would probably come up and manifest in these arguments between the GM and the character. This dichotomy between where the character loves these people and the player is talking about them like they're annoyances, like they're nothing. And like that would just feed into this already tense relationship that we've built. So I think that would come into play beautifully, but would not have done so if we didn't pick that particular dynamic.
Right. Yeah.
It's really interesting because like the TV show showrunner sort of thing, you could have the writer's room sort of thing going on. You've got the like screenplay sort of dynamic as well. You could have like multiple people collaborating on that.
And it's like so much bigger of a concept though. Like the scale changes when you're talking about like a TV show or a novel or, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like the fact that you can play 6 or more different like mediums that completely change the way the game plays is phenomenal.
Yeah. That's cool. I'm glad you liked it. And I'm glad you were so willing to, because it is, you know, like those sort of these games that like the kind of games that I make and the kind of games that I like to play are, you know, very, how do I want to say, loosey-goosey, you know?
That's literally the exact phrase I was going to use.
A little loosey-goosey around the edges. We're not putting numbers on paper. We're really kind of going with vibes. And I know that can kind of, that asks a lot of openness from the people playing it. You know, so I really appreciate any time that people do actually approach it with that openness.
Right. Well, what's nice about those style of games, like when you've got a deck of cards and that's pretty much your main mechanic, right?
Yeah.
Like or you know, something simplistic. There's very little dice rolling. There's no stats to keep track of, that sort of stuff. Those types of games end up being phenomenal bridges between like casual board gamers and like full on getting into role playing.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, like this is a phenomenal bridge of like, I like playing cards. I like, you know, talking with my friends. I like stories, that sort of stuff. Like, and here's a game that lets me tell stories with a friend or two.
Yeah.
And I don't need more than the deck of cards that I already have.
Right. Well, and those are the kind of games, honestly, that I found are really good for introducing people to role-playing games. My brothers play traditional role-playing games. They both have like D&D groups running. My brother has run a session of the Fallout for my other brother and I. But like, I keep trying to like get the rest of my family to do it sneakily. And like, I got my mom and my 2 youngest siblings to play For the Queen with me. And they were like, this is fun. And I was like, yeah, I know, because it like, I tricked you.
I tricked you.
I tricked you, and I was like, let's just like sit down and play this. You know, like it's a card game.
Yeah.
Technically, right?
Yeah.
And that's, you know, because as soon as you start throwing like stats at people, they're like, okay, I got to remember this. I got to figure out you know, these rules. And whereas you're like, here's a card. Can you answer the question? And then they're like, yeah, I can do that. You know,
it's a phenomenal experience because like I would argue that collaborative storytelling is probably the oldest pastime in humanity. Of like sitting around the
like
fire and telling
tales,
stories.
Yeah,
the great human tradition of spinning a yarn. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that we've gamified that experience
in so many
in
different
like,
ways too.
So many different ways.
Hey,
right?
Ryan, game's good.
Game's good.
Game's good. I mean, this is really where we always game's good.
Game's good. I love
now,
it. And
we've got to ask Dillin questions too.
Ooh, ask me some questions.
Because we've told you what's great.
Oh, yes. One of my favorite questions for developers, for designers of games and whatnot. For this game in specific, what do you feel is one of the biggest flaws of character creation specifically in the system? And what is your favorite part?
Woof. Okay.
It's okay if you feel like it doesn't have flaws. If it does what you want it to do.
The thing is that it surely does. But admitting that right now seems very risky because I cannot rewrite this game. Right. I can't do it again. I think there's a line where I could go further and I could spend a lot more time asking more questions. I don't know if that's the right call or if I should have done that. I'm not saying that, but I do feel like there's a part of me that wanted to ask even more questions in the character creation journey. Was
that because you feel like you had more things that you were interested in, like knowing, like when you played the game, or is that because you feel like people weren't able to do what you wanted them to do with what was there?
I guess I feel like I know I'm asking a lot, like of people to sort of invent these people out of thin air, and maybe there's a part of me thinking like, should I give you more, like more questions, more probes to think about who they are before you start playing? Like, I don't know that I
to work with.
Yeah. So I don't know that I do feel like it needs to be changed, but I do think about that a little bit.
I don't think it does, for what it's worth. I don't personally like.
Yeah, I think the way it's presented right now, it's very succinct. It's very straightforward, and it gets you into the game sooner, right?
I think
like,
it left more room to explore those things through playing. Whereas I think if you start asking more questions, there's less to say through play.
Yes. And the questions are in such a way between the two protagonists and author that they hook into one another kind of perfectly to the point where it's like, if you're going to have more of a tingle. Yeah. I think if you have more questions.
Yeah, this is like a jigsaw that fits really well together already. And I think if you start adding more pieces, things don't fit as well. I mean, I could definitely see how, depending, and this is one of those, like, we often come to this conclusion when we ask this question is like, well, it's not for everyone. That like, there may be people that want more information before they jump into things.
Yeah.
And and so the question is like, can you create a game that does everything everyone wants at once? And the answer is no.
Which you can't. And I'm not interested in doing that. Right. I'm simply not. I'm not interested in that. I don't want that responsibility. And that's not the point of, because making these games it has to be art to me. It cannot be, it cannot be a product, because it's not a very good product. It like appeals to like, a very small group of people. And that's exactly what I want it to be. Right. That's what I need it to be. You know, every single one of the games that I love the most, the games that I think about constantly, the ones that are like always on my mind, those are games that always, that are so specific, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's like it's that niche that it's like, you know, not everybody wants it, but the people that do are here for it.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think too, like as far as adding
Absolutely.
more questions, like there was nothing in there saying that like Ryan and I could not ask each other more questions if we wanted to. If we had other things that it was like before we jump in, I'm like, hey, I want to know this, you know?
Yeah. Like, what's our ship look like?
Right.
What's, you know, where have we been, you know, in this campaign? Like, how long have we been playing for? Blah, blah, blah. Right.
Yeah.
So there's like all sorts of things we easily could have dove into had we the time and wish
And the
to
inclination to do. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I always think it's easier to like let people add things if they want than it is to be like, here's the thing. And people are like, no, I don't want to. Yeah. What do you feel like is the best part about this?
Yes.
What do you love most?
I love truthful. Wow. We have some
We're
words
doing great
in here.
over here.
Truthfully, I think my favorite bit is kind of the end game of this game, because the end game has some pretty big, is asking some pretty big feelings from particularly the author. Whereas like first, like compared to the start of the game, do you feel convinced that the protagonist is real? And if you do, how is that going to change how you write, how you create from now on? If you don't, and you don't accept any of this, you are solely in charge. Does that change how you move forward with this? And I really like, there is also a 3-player version of this that I put at the end, wherein there's an audience element. So the third player would represent like the author, the audience of the story, which I also think is very fun. Like how, like who is really in control of this for you, author? Is it you? Are you in control? Is your audience in control, or is the protagonist in control? And I think those questions at the end are so amazing.
That's really like, if this was a game for a podcast or a live stream that we were playing here with Gideon as one of the main characters, like is Marcella making decisions based off of what the audience wants or what she thinks the audience would want? That sort of stuff. That would be. I mean,
in this place, in this game, I feel like the audience is the rest of the group, right?
Right. That could be too, right? Absolutely.
In which case, that's a very key factor, because like we've already sort of established that the audience, like the other players are like not playing the same game that Marcella is.
Yeah.
And how does that impact things?
Yeah.
They're like actively undermining the things that she's doing.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. So this is the part we've all been waiting for.
What is
this? Is our fanfic section.
Hell yeah.
This is where we decide what would happen if we played this game that we will never play.
Yeah. So I was very curious, like if we could pull some cards for like acts 2 and 3 and kind of see what we would have gotten and kind of discuss how things might have turned out at all.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So I've got my cards. Trusty, I've been shuffling them on and off during this conversation, so they should be well shuffled. And the first card is the 2 of Spades for Act 2. So tell us a bit about Act 2. It's the turning point, right?
Yes. So Act 1 is you're realizing that trouble is brewing. You're realizing that things are going to be things are going to be going in a poor direction. In Act 2, we're here. There's 2 distinct paths that are going to appear to the protagonist that they have to go down. And So you said the 2 was what you drew?
Yeah, the 2. Yep.
So the protagonist finds it likely that they will perish in pursuit of their goal, which lines up with what we kind of had in that establishment. So it's like, if you want to save these people, if you want to save the people victim to this dying star, the only way it's happening is if you go down with it. There's no other way out of it. And the protagonist has to realize this and knows that there is no other way forward unless they can convince the author to change the circumstances, to get them to fix this. And so in Act 2, what my goal is for the protagonist to hit a point of desperation. You've got to, by any means necessary, convince this person that what they're doing isn't necessary. This can't be the only option. There has to be another way. But I'm honestly, a good self-sacrifice story. It's so good. How yummy, how delicious,
Right.
And so the author could really be married to that, and why change something so good?
Oh, yeah. And
yeah,
what's really interesting is both the protagonist and the author draw a card here, right? And keep it secret from one another at the start of the scene.
They do. So the author's card is gonna push what is going on in the story. Then in the scene, in scene 2, where they are confronting each other again, that's when the cards come into play. During this argument, every time these characters hit on like key topics. So the protagonist can draw additional cards every time they appeal to the author's goals or anytime they give the author pause. So, and then the author can draw additional cards anytime that they cause the protagonist to defend their personhood. So anytime these things happen in this confrontation, you're drawing more cards. And then what happens is, starting with the 2 first cards, we're going to compare them. And if they match suit or number, it's going to add to the author or the protagonist's favor.
Oh.
But from that point, there is the option to gamble and to test fate by flipping over more of the cards that you've drawn. The thing is that you can never go backwards. So if you don't like your result and you decide to flip again, the other person can also decide to flip again. And you can't undo it. So once you flip those cards, you have to go with what you land on. And so it's a little bit of a gamble. It's a little bit of a risk. And, but it does give you some control over the outcome. And that's like, I think for the most part, people wind up saving them all for the Act 3 outcome to try to, get the most out of it.
One up each other?
Yeah. But that makes for this dramatic sort of back and forth. And you can decide to just do that too, where you're just gambling and then you go with whatever the result is. Or you could let those kinds of gambles drive the argument that you're having, where one person is getting the upper hand and it's changing hands. Yeah.
I really like the thought of playing this as almost an isekai sort of situation where Marcella gets pulled into this universe and confronted. But it could very well be an internal sort of dialogue that Marcella's having, about this
with her cup of
or it could be I'm gonna go refill my cursed Mountain Dew that's got this weird stuff going on. I'll be right back. And then Marcella never comes back to the table.
Yeah.
Sort of deal until an hour or 2 later.
Yeah.
See, I like the separation between them. That it's just there's just enough there, the connection that you can feel things going in a different direction, but it's because there's also that uncertainty too, right? Of
yeah, there is. There's a lot of
Are
uncertainty.
you actually doing something, or am I just subconsciously making those things happen, or what?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
Who wins, Ren?
Really interesting.
Who's going to win here?
Who's going to win? So I did pull a card for the Act 3.
Uh-huh.
Okay, what'd you get?
I got a 3 of diamonds.
Okay. So the story ends in victory, not necessarily for the protagonist, but for the author's narrative. So now there's one thing we haven't taken into account here is how well the protagonist has been arguing their point with the author.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know. Maybe by Act 3, the author, our PC, our player, decides that no, like they actually don't want this character to die. Maybe they want to keep telling their story. And we'll find another way. But maybe this is her out. Maybe it's time to die. It's time to die. And maybe it's even like, you know what? I want to play the stupid little idiot guy. I don't want to bring a serious character to this table anymore when no one cares about it. I
think there's also the question too of like, you know, we didn't really ever establish that Marcella was like, my character needs to die tragically. It was only like, I want to tell a serious story. And, you know, so like put you through all of those things, but there's also nothing in there that says that like you can't, at the end of that, open up your little tea shop. Now, how much trauma do you have before you get there?
Yeah.
Is a question. But like,
like what if
did you have to lose to
a
get
matter
that?
of what if it is a matter that you and or teammates have to perish in order for you to become a normal person,
right?
To open up a tea shop, like
to say I've been through enough to do.
Does the act of dying with these cosmic necromantic powers like release you from the burden of heroism?
You're no longer connected to the cosmos after that happens.
Yeah,
like that was the thing that had to happen for you to get what you wanted.
Yeah. So like your reward is you get effectively reconstituted in the place of your choosing to live your quiet life.
Yeah. I knew it was best for you all along.
Yeah. Until the game master decides that system is the next target.
Yeah. Oof. Oh my goodness.
Yep.
And who's going to be the protector now?
Rex.
Exactly.
Rex is going to be the protector.
Rex is in charge of everything now.
Power transfer over to Rex? Sounds amazing. That's because we established canonically, quote unquote, that Rex, as unserious of a character they are, they've always had like in the pocket serious like aspirations for that character. And what if losing a friend and gaining that friend's powers is that like
just the motivation
tragic
you needed? Yep.
Story spin.
Yep.
Yeah.
Your defining character event.
Yeah. So does Marcella then go on to retire this character as a tea shop owner and then join the team as a non-serious character, but now Rex is like
in charge.
Super serious.
Oh no.
In charge.
Oh no.
Like business is business because they've lost all levity once Gideon had perished. Maybe.
I mean, I feel like I'd have to make a new character at that point for sure.
You would have to.
Right.
Yeah. Because I can't just play a tea shop owner. That's not very adventurous.
But then Gideon becomes an NPC in the
right.
Yeah, exactly.
World. Yeah.
Yep. It's perfect.
That's beautiful.
Unless she dies.
Yep.
Yep.
Unless you never know.
It's true.
Yeah.
I guess that's just Dice's dice if Rex is going to be able to save that solar system.
Yeah.
And see their old pal Gideon one last time before the end of the campaign.
They don't save the solar system.
Yeah.
What if that's the way they live? Is they fail to save everybody and then they stop seeking out these dead stars because they failed so poorly.
End of campaign.
End of campaign.
No, if I can't play a serious game, I am derailing this so hard.
That's it. It's over. It's done.
It's amazing. Was the tea shop a secret goal of Gideon then? Like, was it something that you kept from the game master and the other players?
Well, that wasn't even my personal goal. That was Gideon's as a character. So I don't know.
See, now we're getting into the blend. Did Gideon, the character, have that goal, or was that goal imbued upon Gideon by her player, Marcella?
Yeah. Well, I don't think Marcella would have wanted that. I think that was Gideon's goal.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
I don't feel, Ryan, like we need this last section because it's kind of just what the game is like character growth.
Right. So. But I'm very curious if you can indulge me for a moment to go into our advancement discussion. So I can say, let's take it up a level.
Take it up a level. Take it up a level.
So I was very curious, how does the resolution work? You mentioned it a little bit earlier of like what it kind of leads up to, but like mechanically, how do we determine how things resolve in this game?
So once things resolve at the very, very end, so the story has its resolution, and then we have our resolution with the author and the protagonist, between the two of them. So like if the final tally is that the author has more favor, they end this story refusing to believe that the protagonist is real in any way. They are simply a character. They live only within our own imagination. They are nothing more than that. These conversations were simply us toiling over the direction of our novel. That is it. And we can have one final conversation under that context, that new acceptance.
Oh, interesting.
If the protagonist has more favor, the author has accepted that the characters in their fiction have an agency of their own. They understand that the protagonist was able to reach through the pages and visit with them, and that their pen has consequences for the people it writes. So then we get to have a conversation with that as the context.
Yeah.
If there's an even amount or no favor at all, the author is deeply confused by the events of this. They have not been convinced that the protagonist is real, but can't come to deny that they spoke. So the author may become afraid of writing new stories or curious and wanting to test the theory. So these three outcomes really are just providing you context with which to have your final conversation. So there's no more opportunity to change the story. So for the protagonist, you're no longer going to try to beg or plead with this person. There's no longer any point to that, but you do get to talk to them one last time, and how they respond to you is going to be dependent on one of those three outcomes.
I like it.
Yeah, that feels amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. I also say that if the audience has more favor as well as a potential optional rule.
In the three-player version, yes. In the three-player version, the audience has more favor. In that outcome, the author may believe in the protagonist or not, but regardless, what's more important to them is making the audience happy, even at the cost of their own artistic vision or the autonomy of the characters. Public opinion is all that matters. And that is what's going to be the final conversation.
Got to get those ratings up.
Gotta make sure the audience is happy.
The meta discussion around this game is just so palpable.
Juicy. One might say.
Yeah, it's one might say.
One would hopefully not, though.
Yeah.
If they knew what was good for them, one would not say.
I didn't say it this time.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
may have thought it.
Yep.
But I did not say it. Oh, goodness. Dillin,
yes.
Thank you so much for joining us to talk about Metalepsis. This has been phenomenal.
Thank you so much for talking about my silly little game.
It's
Appreciate you.
It's so good.
Absolutely. Can you remind everyone where they can find you online and what sorts of things you're working on?
100%. I am Super Dillin everywhere on the internet. You can find me on the Atomless. You can find me as host of One Shot here on this network. And you can find my games at superdillin.itch.io. I am working on several things right now. I am writing for Warren Guard, a Dragon Rider RPG. You can find me in the upcoming releases from Capers, Cyberpunk, and from City of Mist. And just watch the stars for Patchwork Productions. We're about to be releasing our first new series outside of the Atomless. So yeah.
Exciting.
Very nice.
Well, thank you again for sitting down with us, and thank you to everyone else for tuning in.
Call to action.
Yeah, like that.
Dillin was a phenomenal guest this series. The discussion that we got into was fantastic. I saw something that they had posted previously that they make games that they want to play, that they love. And if other people love it, that's fantastic. But the first and foremost, make games that you love. I think that's kind of a beautiful sentiment as a designer, is if you design for yourself and you're happy with what you create, I think that's really cool. And what Dillin created here is kind of poetic in that it is a game about meta narrative and all sorts of interesting thoughts around like what happens to our characters when we're not at the helm, so to speak. As an author, as a player of an RPG and all sorts of stuff. It's kind of interesting to think about that sort of world existing, whether or not we're playing it, whether or not we're writing it, whether or not we're experiencing it, right? So it brings up some cool philosophical questions, and I think that's pretty great. RPGs are really cool for a lot of things, and philosophical debate and discussion is also really cool to explore in RPGs. And this game is no stranger to that, it seems. But before we let you go for the day, we do have calls to action. We are at the end of our anniversary month. We would love to do a proper Patreon drive once life settles down a bit. But if you want to help us out right now and get head start on rewards for a future campaign, this would be the absolute best way to do so. If you head over to our Patreon at patreon.com/charactercreationcast, you can sign up for any of our basic tiers as a free trial and check out all of the non-physical rewards at that level for free for 7 days. Each level has a ton of great rewards associated with it. You can join our Sticker of the Month Club at $10, get some custom C3 dice and a personalized thank you card from Amelia for $5 and up, as well as chit chats every week. We're able to do them for everybody $1 and up. This, along with many other fantastic perks, are available for you if you head on over to that URL. We also like to thank all of our patrons personally every episode, which is what we're about to do right now, starting with Lieutenant and DJG, aka Tigranosaurus. You shouldn't have, but we're so glad you did. Eric Bonst and Daryl Holiday II, thanks for your continued support. Thanks to Shadim Kaval and the Shyest Barbarian. So glad to have you backing us. Thank you to Benjamin Sweeney and Lorcan McGinnis. Your support brings us so much joy. Rob Fletcher and Kevin Brown, thanks for your continued support as well. Thank you to Tentacle Duck and Cole McCallum. We appreciate your support, John Adamus and Xander the Xanthic Schoensquintly xylophonist on the Zebek examining Xyrus and Xiphias xylography on Xalums. Thank you. Carlos Salazar and Eric S., thanks for making this all possible. Ian Potmeyer and Sorigoth, thank you so much. Liam G. and Brian Colm, many thanks to you. Thanks, Garden GM and Tanglefoot. So glad to have you backing us. Blue Kryptonite and Danny, we appreciate your support. Thank you. Nicole Trainer and Liam Murray, many thanks to you. Kenning and Brian Kurtz, thanks for believing in us. And Mark E. Fair and Drew Owen, thanks for making this all possible. And thank you to all of our future patrons. Your support is helping to keep the lights on for the show. We are currently barely breaking even and really could use your help. So if you want to help us out at all, this is the best way to do so. Just head on over to patreon.com/charactercreationcast to find out all the cool stuff that you can get. If you are already supporting the Patreon or can't afford to do so right now and still want to show your support for the show, the next best way to do so is to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, Podcast Addict, or even Facebook. We'll read your review right here and thank you personally the episode after we get the review. So if you get it in now, you're going to be at the top of the list. That's all we have for you for today's episode and our last episode of the month. We will be taking a break for the next 2 weeks to prep for May's series. But until then, take care, everyone. Stay safe, drink some water, and keep making those amazing people. We'll see you next time. Character Creation Cast is a production of the One Shot Podcast Network and can be found online at www.charactercreationcast.com. Head to the website to get more information on our hosts, this show, and even our press kit. Character Creation Cast can also be found on Twitter and Blue Sky at CreationCast, or on our Discord server at discord.charactercreationcast.com. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Bolter, and I can be found on Twitter and Blue Sky at Lord Neptune or online at lordneptune.com. Our other host, Amelia Antrim, can be found on Twitter and Blue Sky at Ginger Reckoning. Music for this episode is used with a Creative Commons license or with permission from the podcast they originated from. Further information can be found within the show notes. Our main theme music is Hero Remix by Steve Combs and is used with a Creative Commons license. This podcast is owned by us under Creative Commons. This episode was edited by Ryan Bolter. Further information for the game systems used and today's guests can also be found in the show notes. If you'd like to support our show, find us on Patreon. Get access to bonus episodes, exclusive merch, and much more at patreon.com/charactercreationcast. Thanks for joining us. And remember, we find that the best part of any role-playing game is character creation. So go out there and create some amazing people. We'll see you next time.